And it was at Oxford that he became friends with another young Oxford professor, who was 6 years younger than him, and that was C.S. Lewis, who we all know, of course. And Tolkien and Lewis became great friends. And the original source of the friendship was a shared love of mythology, of stories, and especially Norse mythology. So the mythology surrounding, say, the myths of Scandinavia, for instance. And Tolkien had formed a club of his fellow philologists and medievalists to read the Elder Eddar, one of the Norse sagas. And Lewis asked if he could join the group, even though he couldn't speak Old Norse, unlike Tolkien, who could. Spoke many ancient languages and invented a couple. So Lewis came along, and that's how the friendship began. When the Coldbiter, the name of that group that Tolkien set up, when they disbanded, when they finished reading the book, their purpose of existence ceased to be. They disbanded. Lewis had so much enjoyed this fellowship of men discussing literature that he formed what would become known as the Inklings, a group of literary friends of which Tolkien was a member, and the Inklings would basically meet then twice a week, once in Lewis's rooms in Magdalen College, Oxford, and once in the Eagle and Child pub, which they nicknamed the Bird and Baby. So Tolkien and Lewis would see each other at least twice a week for many, many years and became great friends. Tolkien reading his works in manuscript to Lewis, and Lewis reading his works, and to their friends also. But when they first became friends, Lewis was an atheist. And on September the 19th, 1931, there was what became known as the Long Night Talk, is what C.S. Lewis called it. Long night talk between Tolkien and Lewis and their friend Hugo Dyson. And they were talking about one of their favorite subjects, myth. And you have to understand when you're talking anything to do with Tolkien or Lewis, myth emphatically does not mean a lie. And we use the word myth these days to be synonymous with something which is untrue. That's never the way that Tolkien and Lewis use it. Myth is merely from the Greek. It just means story. So in discussing myth, discussing story, mythopoeia, the making of stories, storytelling. And C.S. Lewis said, but myths are lies and therefore worthless, even though breathed through silver. In other words, myths are just beautiful lies, and we like them because they're beautiful, but they don't actually tell us the truth. And as truth is all that really matters, ultimately, therefore, they're worthless. And Tolkien said, no, they're not lies, and then expounded upon to Tolkien, to Lewis, what I call his philosophy of myth, and we'll talk about that more in the next session. But this had such a profound impact on C.S. Lewis that within a few weeks of that long night talk with Tolkien on the philosophy of myth, the love of wisdom to learn through stories, that Lewis became a Christian. And he said the long night talk with Tolkien had a great deal to do with it. So Tolkien was a major influence on C.S. Lewis's conversion, but also so was Tolkien's philosophy of myth, which would inform his own works. Speaking of which, in 1936, Tolkien began work on a book called The Hobbit, which would be published in the following year, 1937, with the very memorable first line, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And again, he wrote this initially for his own children, so Tolkien the paterfamilias. But of course, it was ultimately published, was very successful, and The Lord of the Rings initially was commissioned as a follow-up to The Hobbit. It's another children's story. Of course, it grew out of control, grew big, grew long, and one of the charming things about The Lord of the Rings is that Tolkien came to believe, because it was now not what it was meant to be, no longer a short children's story, but this huge epic, that it would never be published.